Hello, my name is Herbert Alpiker, and I will be your instructor for this segment titled Privileges and Limitations for the Aviation Maintenance Technician. In Section 65 of your book titled Federal Aviation Regulations for Aircraft Maintenance Technicians, you will find those eligibility requirements to receive your mechanic certificate as an FAA aircraft mechanic. First amongst those eligibility requirements is that the applicant must be at least 18 years of age. Secondly, he must be able to read, write, speak, and understand the English language. If he does not meet that requirement, but he is employed by a U.S. air carrier outside of the United States, his certificate must be endorsed valid only outside the United States. Thirdly, he must have passed all of the prescribed tests within a period of 24 months. Those prescribed tests are your general test that you take after you have completed your first semester in this program, and then either your airframe test, which you will take after you have completed your 2 semesters of airframe, or your power plant test, which you will take after you have completed your 2 semesters of power plant. You must complete either your general and airframe test or your general and power plant test before you will be eligible to take the oral and practical test for either one of those licenses. Once you pass those written tests, you then have 24 months to successfully complete your oral and practical testing and receive your certificate. Fourth, you must comply with the sections of this subpart that apply to the rating which you seek. Section 65.77 of the Federal Aviation Regulations, or FARs, details the experience requirements for obtaining your airframe and/or power plant certificates. One way of meeting those requirements is by graduating from a certified aviation maintenance technician school. A second way of meeting those experience requirements is by presenting documentary evidence which satisfies the FAA that you have at least 18 months of practical experience with procedures, practices, materials, tools, machine tools, and equipment generally used in constructing, maintaining, or altering airframes or power plants appropriate to the rating you seek, or at least 30 months of practical experience concurrently performing the duties appropriate to both the airframe and power plant ratings. Experience gained from the military, work as an airframe or power plant mechanic, or work on an experimental amateur-built aircraft should be evaluated on its own merits to determine whether it fulfills the experience requirements. Section 65.75 of the FARs details the knowledge requirements an applicant must meet to be eligible to apply to take the oral and practical test prescribed in Section 65.79. To meet the requirements of 65.75, the applicant must pass a written test covering the construction and maintenance of aircraft appropriate to the rating he seeks, whether it be the airframe or power plant rating. In the FAA regulations in parts 43, 65, and 91 of this chapter, the basic principles covering the installation and maintenance of propellers are included in the power plant test. Section 65.79 of the FARs details the skill requirements for obtaining either the airframe or power plant mechanic certificates. To meet these requirements, the applicant must pass an oral and a practical test on the rating he seeks. The tests cover the applicant's basic skill in performing practical projects on the subjects covered by the written test for that rating. An applicant for a power plant rating must show his ability to make satisfactory minor repairs to and minor alterations of propellers. Section 65.81 of the FARs describes some of the general privileges and limitations of a FAA certified mechanic. A certified mechanic may perform or supervise the maintenance, preventative maintenance, or alteration of an aircraft, appliance, or part thereof for which he is rated, but with the exception that he is not allowed to make any major repair to or major alteration of propellers, and he is not allowed to make any repair to or alteration of aircraft instruments. However, the mechanic may not exercise these aforementioned privileges unless he has satisfactorily performed that work at an earlier time. If he does not meet this requirement, he may do so by showing his ability to do the work in a manner which satisfies the FAA or under the direct supervision of a certificated and appropriately rated mechanic or a certificated repairman who has had previous experience in the specific operation concerned. Additionally, Section 65.81 of the FARs states that a certificated mechanic may not exercise the privileges of his certificate and rating unless he understands the current instructions of the manufacturer and the maintenance manuals for the specific operation concerned. Section 65.85 of the FARs grants the holder of an airframe rating the authority to approve and return to service an airframe or any related part or appliance after he has performed, supervised, or inspected its maintenance or alteration, with the exception that he may not approve for return to service any major repair or alteration except as provided for in paragraph B of this section. In addition, he may perform the 100-hour inspection required by Part 91 of this chapter on an airframe or any related part or appliance and approve and return it to service. Paragraph B of Section 65.85 states that a certificated mechanic with an airframe rating can approve and return to service an airframe or any related part or appliance of an aircraft with a special airworthiness certificate in the light sport category after performing and inspecting a major repair or major alteration for products that are not produced under an FAA approval, provided the work was performed in accordance with instructions developed by the manufacturer or a person acceptable to the FAA. Section 65.87 of the FARs is similar to Section 65.85, except that it pertains to the power plant rating instead of the airframe rating. 65.87 authorizes any mechanic with a power plant rating to approve and return to service a power plant or propeller or any related part or appliance after he has performed, supervised, or inspected its maintenance or alteration. However, as in 65.85, he may not approve for return to service any major repair or major alteration except as provided for in paragraph B of this section. In addition, he may perform the 100-hour inspection required by Part 91 of this chapter on a power plant or propeller or any part thereof and approve it for return to service. And again, as in 65.85, paragraph B of Section 65.87 states that a certificated power plant mechanic can approve and return to service a power plant or propeller or any related part or appliance of an aircraft with a special airworthiness certificate in the light sport category after performing and inspecting a major repair or major alteration for products that are not produced under an FAA approval, provided the work was performed in accordance with instructions developed by the manufacturer or a person acceptable to the FAA. Section 65.89 states that any person holding a mechanic certificate must keep it in the area where he normally exercises the privileges of the certificate and shall present it for inspection upon request of an authorized representative of the FAA, TSA, NTSB, or any federal, state, or local law enforcement officer. Unlike your automobile driver's license, your FAA-issued mechanic's license does not expire. However, the FARs require that you must meet some recent experience requirements in order to exercise the privileges of your certificate and rating. Section 6583 of the FARs states that a certificated mechanic may not exercise the privileges of his certificate and rating unless within the preceding 24 months A, the FAA has found that he is able to do that work, or B, he has for at least 6 months served as a mechanic under his certificate and rating, technically supervised other mechanics, or supervised in an executive capacity the maintenance or alteration of aircraft, or been engaged in any combination of the above three. As we have previously learned, an airframe and powerplant mechanic may not inspect and return to service a certified aircraft after a major repair or alteration. Additionally, the airframe and powerplant mechanic may not perform an annual inspection on an aircraft and return it for return to service. To legally perform these additional functions, an airframe and powerplant mechanic must obtain an inspection authorization. To be eligible for an inspection authorization, a mechanic must 1. Hold a currently effective mechanic certificate with both an airframe rating and a powerplant rating, each of which is currently effective and has been in effect for a total of at least 3 years. 2. He must have been actively engaged for at least the 2-year period before the date he applies in maintaining aircraft certified and maintained in accordance with this chapter. And 3. He must have a fixed base of operations at which he may be located in person or by telephone during a normal working week, but it need not be the place where he will exercise his inspection authority. Additionally, an airframe and powerplant mechanic wanting to obtain an inspection authorization must 4. Have available to him the equipment, facilities, and inspection data necessary to properly inspect airframes, powerplants, propellers, or any related part or appliance, and 5. Pass a written test on his ability to inspect according to safety standards for returning aircraft to service after major repairs and major alterations, and annual and progressive inspections performed under Part 43 of this chapter. If the applicant fails the tests prescribed above, he may not apply for retesting until at least 90 days after the date he failed the test. Unlike the airframe and powerplant ratings, which do not expire, the inspection authorization expires on March 31st of each odd-numbered year, unless renewed. And yet, even if it is still valid, a mechanic with an inspection authorization may not exercise the privileges of that authorization unless both his airframe and powerplant ratings are currently effective. Additionally, an inspection authorization will no longer be effective if 1. The authorization is surrendered, suspended, or revoked. 2. The holder no longer has a fixed base of operation. Or 3. The holder no longer has the equipment, facilities, and inspection data required by 65.91. Some of the privileges of the holder of an inspection authorization include 1. He may inspect and approve for return to service an aircraft after a major repair or major alteration, provided that that work was done in accordance with approved data. We will learn more about what constitutes approved data later in this course. And 2. He may perform an annual inspection or perform or supervise a progressive inspection. Just like the airframe and powerplant mechanic, the holder of an inspection authorization must present it upon request to an authorized representative of the FAA, NTSB, or any federal, state, or local law enforcement officer. Additionally, whenever exercising the privileges of an inspection authorization, the holder must make it available for inspection by the aircraft owner or the mechanic submitting the aircraft repair or alteration for approval. As we learned in Section 65.91, an airframe and powerplant mechanic must have a fixed base of operation to be eligible for an inspection authorization. If he changes the location of his fixed base of operation, he may not exercise the privileges of the authorization until he has notified the FAA, FSDO, or International Field Office for the area in which the new base is located in writing of the change of address. An additional eligibility requirement for the repairman certificate is that the applicant must be recommended for certification by his employer as able to maintain aircraft or components appropriate to the job for which he is employed. Not only is the repairman certificate only valid for the specific task for which it was issued, but it is also only valid when working for the employer who recommended the technician for the certificate. This recommendation must be made to the FAA in the form of a letter from the employer and must detail the amount of experience and training the applicant has that qualifies him for the specific task to be performed under the certificate. Another eligibility requirement for the repairman certificate is that the applicant must have either A, at least 18 months of practical experience in the procedures, practices, inspection methods, materials, tools, machine tools, and equipment generally used in the maintenance duties of the specific job for which the person is to be employed and certificated, or B, completed formal training that is acceptable to the administrator and is specifically designed to qualify the applicant for the job on which the applicant is to be employed. One last eligibility requirement for the repairman certificate is that, just like for the airframe and powerplant certificates, the applicant must be able to read, write, speak, and understand the English language, or in the case of an applicant who does not meet this requirement and who is employed outside the United States by a certificated repair station, a certificated U.S. commercial operator, or a certificated U.S. air carrier, have his certificate endorsed, valid only outside the United States. These eligibility requirements for repairman certificate under 65.101 do not apply to the issuance of repairman certificate in the experimental aircraft category or to a repairman certificate under the light sport aircraft category. As we have shown earlier, the holder of a repairman certificate may perform or supervise the maintenance, preventative maintenance, or alteration of an aircraft or aircraft component only for doing the type of work for which he was employed and certificated, and only for the employer who recommended and employed him. Just like the airframe and powerplant mechanic, the certificated repairman must thoroughly understand both the current instructions of the certificate holder for whom he is employed and the manufacturer's instructions for continued airworthiness for any task he may perform or supervise under his repairman certificate. The privileges and limitations detailed in Section 65.103 of the Federal Aviation Regulations do not apply to the holder of a repairman certificate for light sport category aircraft. A repairman certificate may be issued to the builder of an experimental aircraft provided he meets the eligibility requirements. The only privilege afforded to the repairman under this section is the accomplishment of the annual condition inspection. The certificate will be valid for only one person and for one aircraft. The eligibility requirements to obtain a certificate under this section are 1. Must be at least 18 years of age. 2. Be the primary builder of the aircraft. 3. Show to the satisfaction of the administrator that the individual has the requisite skill to determine whether the aircraft is in a condition for safe operation. And 4. Be a citizen or permanent resident of the United States. Section 120.15 of the Federal Aviation Regulations states that any person who holds a certificate under Section 65 and who is subject to alcohol and drug testing and who refuses to take a required drug or alcohol test may be denied an application up to 1 year after the date of refusal for any certificate under Part 65 and may have any certificate issued under Part 65 suspended or revoked. Unless authorized by the administrator, any person who copies or intentionally removes a written test under this part, or who gives to another or receives from another any part or copy of a test, or who gives help on a test to or receives help from a test from any person during the period the test is being given, or who takes any part of a test on behalf of another person, or who uses any material or aid during the period the test is being given, or who intentionally causes, assists, or participates in any act prohibited by this paragraph will be ineligible for any airman or ground instructor certificate or rating under this chapter for a period of 1 year after the date of the act. Additionally, they may have any license or certificate issued under this part suspended or revoked. Section 65.12 states that a conviction for the violation of any federal or state statute relating to the growing, processing, manufacture, sale, disposition, possession, transportation, or importation of narcotic drugs, marijuana, or depressant or stimulant drugs or substances is grounds for 1. Denial of an application for any certificate or rating issued under this part for a period of up to 1 year after the date of final conviction, or 2. Suspension or revocation of any certificate or rating issued under this part. Once having completed all of the requirements for a rating issued under Part 65, the applicant may be issued a temporary certificate valid for no more than 120 days while a review of his application and supplementary documents is undergone. Except for the repairman certificate, a certificate or rating issued under Part 65 is effective until it is surrendered, suspended, or revoked. A repairman certificate is effective until the holder of that certificate is either relieved from the duties for which he was employed and certificated, or until his certificate is surrendered, suspended, or revoked. The holder of any certificate issued under Part 65 whose license has been suspended or revoked shall return it to the administrator. On the next several slides, you will find the definitions for major and minor repairs, major and minor alterations, maintenance, and preventative maintenance. You should look to Appendix A of Part 43 for further guidance on what constitutes a major repair or alteration or preventative maintenance. Except as provided for in paragraph C of section 91.409, no person may operate an aircraft unless, within the preceding 12 calendar months, it has had an annual inspection in accordance with Part 43 of this chapter and has been approved for return to service by a person holding an inspection authorization. Except as provided for in paragraph C of section 91.409, no person may operate an aircraft carrying any person other than a crew member for hire, and no person may give flight instruction for hire in an aircraft which that person provides unless within the preceding 100 hours of time in service the aircraft has received an annual or 100-hour inspection and has been approved for return to service in accordance with Part 43 of this chapter. Section 91.409 informs us of the amount of time a 100-hour inspection may be exceeded and for what purpose. It also tells us that this extra time must be considered when computing when the next 100-hour inspection is due. Paragraph C of section 91.409 informs us of the types of aircraft which are exempt from the requirements for an annual and 100-hour inspection. The annual and 100-hour inspections are identical in scope and detail. They differ only in who may perform them. Who may perform and authorize for return to service an aircraft after a 100-hour inspection? Who may perform and authorize for return to service an aircraft after an annual inspection? Each person performing a 100-hour or annual inspection must use a checklist. That checklist may be one made up by the mechanic himself, or one made up or designed and developed by the manufacturer of the aircraft. But in either case, the checklist must include at least those items listed in Appendix D of Part 43.